Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into a story that has turned Turkish entertainment headlines upside down, a story that blends on-screen chemistry with real life and turns whispers into a life-changing announcement. We are talking about Cenk Torun and Mahassine Merabet, two names that have shared the screen with intensity and now share a future with intention. If you enjoy calm, detailed storytelling that respects privacy while capturing the atmosphere, make sure you like and subscribe, because this one has every element that keeps audiences watching to the end. For weeks there had been a slow drumbeat of rumors. It began on fan pages and in short comments under set photos. People noticed overlapping schedules, carefully worded captions, and the kind of easy rapport that makes viewers ask whether fiction is starting to echo reality. No one close to Cenk or Mahassine said anything on the record. That silence only raised the stakes. Then, after a short pause from public appearances, the quiet broke in the most decisive way possible: a wedding. Not a publicity stunt, not a rumor to push ratings, but a ceremony designed for the people who matter most to them, and for the promises they wanted to make. The setting felt both classic and symbolic. The venue opened toward the Bosphorus like a stage curtain, revealing water that connects continents and a skyline that balances history with modern rhythm. Guests arrived as late afternoon light warmed the stones and cast long reflections across the strait. The design was elegant without overstatement: fresh blooms, candlelit paths, and table cards printed on heavy paper in understated fonts. The message was clear. This was celebration as a private promise first, and a public headline only after the final song. Cenk Torun appeared early to greet close friends and family. He has long been a familiar presence for audiences who grew up with his projects and then returned to them years later. There was an old-school polish to his look that evening. A dark, precisely tailored suit, a crisp shirt, a tie chosen to complement the tones of dusk. He moved through the space with a calm that suggested certainty. In brief conversations he thanked people for coming, checked small details others might have missed, and made sure nothing distracted from the moment that was about to begin. When Mahassine Merabet stepped into view, the ambient conversation softened into a hush. Her dress combined tradition and movement, lace tracing the collarbone, a fluid silhouette that allowed her to walk without effort, and hand-finished embroidery that caught only as much light as it needed to. The gown did not compete with her, it framed her. She carried a bouquet built from seasonal flowers, nothing imported, nothing forced. Everything about her presence seemed to answer the question of how to be luminous without turning the evening into spectacle. The ceremony was designed with clear intention. A short aisle led to a simple arch that allowed the Bosphorus to serve as part of the backdrop. The officiant spoke briefly about patience and protection, about the responsibility that love asks for when it leaves the script and enters daily life. Vows were concise and unadorned. No dramatic pauses. No staged sighs. When Cenk and Mahassine exchanged rings, there was a soft ripple from the seated guests, a collective exhale from people who had been invited to share a memory rather than to produce content. Among the guests were colleagues from past productions, mentors who had shaped their careers, and a few friends who rarely attend public events. They were there because this relationship had been built in private, away from red carpets and rumor cycles, and because the couple wanted to anchor this moment in the company of people who know their unedited selves. One longtime collaborator raised a glass and said he had never seen Cenk more at peace. A close friend of Mahassine spoke of her steady dedication, her quiet discipline, and the way she treats kindness as a skill worth practicing. Those toasts were brief, but each line landed with the gravity of experience. As the evening moved from ceremony to celebration, the soundtrack shifted. A string quartet eased into classic melodies for the first hour. Later, a small band introduced modern rhythms without pushing the volume past conversation level. At dinner, the menu honored the city's duality: delicately prepared fish, local dishes revised with quiet flair, and desserts that knew the difference between sweetness and excess. Between courses, people rose to speak briefly, not about celebrity or numbers or strategy, but about daily steadiness. The texts that arrive on hard days, the patience that shows up when schedules collapse, the habit of listening to understand rather than to reply. Attention turned naturally to the story behind the decision. People wanted to know when friendship became something larger, how they kept balance under the weight of scrutiny, and why they chose to step forward now. The answers that emerged from those who know them were quiet. There was no single dramatic pivot. Instead, there was a steady accumulation of respect, the kind that develops when two people watch each other work hard, honor commitments, and handle pressure without losing perspective. In other words, the foundation was built in ordinary days, not in extraordinary headlines. In the days after the ceremony, both artists returned briefly to their routines, ensuring that projects in progress were cared for while carving out space to rest. Colleagues noted that the first priority was not publicity but recovery. That choice resonated with audiences who have learned to tell the difference between marketing cycles and real life. Fans wrote messages that sounded less like commentary and more like community. They shared advice for sustaining two demanding careers under one roof, and they celebrated an approach to love that values deliberate choices over dramatic announcements. A theme kept surfacing in these conversations, the idea that mature love is not less passionate, only more deliberate. For Cenk, who has weathered the shifting currents of the industry, the marriage looked like a chapter that reframed the previous ones rather than replacing them. For Mahassine, whose rise has been rapid and well-earned, it felt like a declaration that ambition and intimacy do not cancel each other out. Together they modeled a balance that many people hope for but are rarely allowed to see clearly in public life. Of course, curiosity about the future followed close behind celebration. Would they work together again on screen, channeling private harmony into a new story for audiences? Would the series that first brought many viewers to them echo elements from reality, or would they keep professional narratives and personal life in parallel lanes? No answers were promised, and none were required. The only certainty, expressed in a short note the next morning, was gratitude, to the guests who kept the evening intimate, to the teams who protected boundaries, and to the audiences who have learned to celebrate without demanding every detail. There was a moment at the reception that people have continued to discuss. It happened late, after formalities had ended. The music softened, the view across the water deepened into night, and conversation settled into a comfortable hum. Cenk and Mahassine stepped aside from the main group and stood near the terrace edge. They did not pose, they did not perform. They simply looked at the city where they build their work and at the water that had framed their vows. A photographer captured the outline, not the faces, two figures standing in proportion to a place they love. The image says more than a caption could supply. Practical touches revealed priorities. Transportation was arranged to minimize disruptions for neighbors. Staff were briefed to redirect anyone attempting to film beyond agreed limits. A portion of the event budget was set aside for a donation to a local program focused on education and arts access. These details were not issued as press releases. They surfaced through the people who worked the event and appreciated being treated as partners rather than background. In a business that often treats logistics as an afterthought, this evening treated them as part of the story. By the end of the night, the narrative had settled into something sustainable. This was a wedding that acknowledged fame without being defined by it. It was a celebration constructed from restraint, affection, and attention to the small comforts that make memory possible. When the last guests departed and the candles were extinguished, the room held the kind of quiet you remember because it honors what just happened and what will happen next. If you are watching this and wondering what matters most in the story, it is not the cut of a suit or the label of a dress. It is the steady alignment that two people managed under public light. It is the choice to answer 1,000 small questions with one decisive sentence. It is the recognition that partnership can be both private and generous at the same time, giving the public enough to celebrate without surrendering everything that makes a home resilient. As always, we will follow the next developments with care. If Cenk, Torun and Mahassine Merabet choose to share new chapters, a joint project, a creative collaboration, or perhaps a glimpse of their first travels as newlyweds, we will bring those updates with the same balance and respect. Until then, the story belongs where it began, between two people who found a way to keep their promises small enough to keep and strong enough to last. Thank you for watching. If this kind of thoughtful coverage is what you look for, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our community for deeper dives and exclusive conversations. Your support helps us tell stories the way they deserve to be told, clearly, calmly, and with attention to what truly matters.